ways leading to the death camp. What did the Allies know about Auschwitz? Why didn't they do something to stop the killing?
By the summer of 1944, the British government knew that Auschwitz was a place of mass murder. Why, given this information, didn't the Allies act sooner? And why, specifically, didn't they bomb Auschwitz?
It's heartbreaking that they didn't. They knew there were gas chambers there. Why didn't they do it?
Gathering intelligence about the Nazi state was a crucial part of the Allied war effort. Information on Nazi atrocities in occupied Europe increased throughout the early years of the war. Reports from Jewish organizations and the Polish underground told of brutal anti-Semitic measures and the segregation of Jews into ghettos. In July 1941, intercepted and decrypted German Enigma codes revealed that Nazi terror had turned into mass murder in the Soviet Union. SS execution squads, known as Einsatzgruppen, were rounding up and shooting Jews and communists. From May 1942, decryptions of German police codes and transport directives revealed that Jews were being rounded up all over occupied Europe and deported to unknown destinations in the East.
Thousands are being packed into open lorries. About 1.5 million Jews have simply disappeared altogether. No one knows how or where.
Then, on the 10th of August, 1942, the Foreign Office received a telegram from Gerhard Riegner of the World Jewish Congress. Based on a report smuggled out of Germany, it revealed Nazi plans for the total annihilation of the Jewish people. Extermination at one blow. It was the first report to reach the West of a systematic policy of extermination. What the Nazis called the final solution.
By the time the Riegner report reaches London, the British government knows that Jews are being slaughtered in vast numbers in Russia by SS units. But they simply could not believe that Jews were being deported from all over Europe to places in the East simply in order to be murdered. This was something that beggared the imagination. You had to stop being human to believe that such a thing was possible. And if you thought the Germans were halfway rational, it seemed to be a bizarre use of rare resources, locomotives, rolling stock, in the middle of a war that had reached a critical stage, shipping Jews all the way to Poland just to kill them. This seemed unbelievable.
On the 6th of October, my name came up for deportation to the East. We didn't know where. We were told, you're going to be transported to the East where you're going to work for the German Reich. probably in a factory, or we didn't know where, what. They didn't tell you you're going into a concentration camp.
We became so automatic. Whatever we were told, we had to do. There was no question of saying, no, I will not go. It was the hottest day I've ever remembered in my life. We were all packed in like sardines. If we touched each other, the bodies were burning.
I remember telling my wife if she wanted to get married, of course I might get sick and ill. Poland is a long way from Holland and it's cold and all that. If I don't get back, you can marry. Be sure you get a husband who's good for the baby. We were thinking about a child, nothing else. But we were very, very frightened people.
Unknown to the Allies, the Nazi extermination plan was already underway. Deportation trains were carrying hundreds of thousands of Jews to a death camp equipped to kill on an industrial scale. Auschwitz. This aerial photograph clearly records the layout of the camp. Auschwitz I, the main camp, had one gas chamber used for the murder of Poles, Soviet prisoners of war, homosexuals, gypsies. Auschwitz II, known as Birkenau, was built mainly for the extermination of Jews. By the middle of 1943, it had 4 large gas chambers and crematoria capable of killing 12,000 people every day.
When they opened the door of the cattle wagons, you could see that the platform was full of SS with dogs and whips in their hand and all that, and they're shouting "Raus!" in this terrible guttural voice.
An SS soldier came along with a club in his hands. He separated the women from the man, and there goes my wife and my baby. And we were told, you see your families every Sunday, every weekend. That wasn't true, never happened. And we were ordered to walk, and we walked through the arch. We had entered Birkenau camp. And a few minutes later, I'm looking to my right, I see on my right a truck coming towards us, and stops in front of us. And the truck is full of women and children. And there's my wife with the baby in her arm. I shout out to her. She didn't hear me. Then the truck moves away.
By 1943, the Allies had learnt of the existence of Auschwitz itself through the decryption of Nazi transport and police codes. But analysts believed it to be nothing more than a slave labor camp, and that the high mortality rates recorded in the German ciphers were due to exhaustion and disease.
For the Allies, there was a great deal of information. Some of it came, of course, from the secret ultra decrypts. But it was actually very difficult to take all these bits of evidence, some of them very partial, some of them just, little snippet here and there. They knew what a murderous war was being conducted, but actually putting it all together into what we now call the Holocaust was, I think, something extremely difficult to do.
Some of the people who came there with their wives and with their children, they're asking, where's our family, where's our wives, where's the children that we had? They said, forget about it, you will never see them again. And can you smell something in the air? They're burning the flesh of your people, the old prisoners telling us. Said, we didn't believe what they were saying. Whoever heard of gassing people and burning them? Whoever would dream of it? A cultured people, the Germans, musicians, authors. It's incredible. I mean, nobody can do that.
And I still didn't believe that they were killing people. I still didn't believe that they were gassing people, because I believed my wife and child was alive.
In July 1944, 2 reports written by Auschwitz escapees were delivered to the Allied governments in London and Washington. One account was by a prisoner who had witnessed at first hand the arrival of trains bringing deportees from all over Europe to Auschwitz. The number of the transports tallied with the official decrypted information. He also delivered detailed plans of the layout of the camp, including sketches of the gas chambers and crematoria. The evidence of mass murder seemed irrefutable. The second report warned of an escalation in the killing. The Nazis had begun the mass deportation of the last Jewish community still untouched by the Holocaust, the 750,000 Jews in Nazi-occupied Hungary.
Somehow rumors reached us and we just couldn't believe it. We thought they were exaggerating. And we were talking about it, what we are going to do after the war, because we were the only Jewish unit still in Europe that hadn't been deported. And we thought we had escaped the fate of all the others.
By the summer of 1944, by the time of the massive deportations of Jews from Hungary to Auschwitz, a huge amount of information had reached British military intelligence and the British government about Auschwitz, about Auschwitz. They knew that tens of thousands, in fact hundreds of thousands of people had been murdered there. So by the time of the deportations of Jews from Hungary, the British government knew that Auschwitz was a place of mass murder, and when the trains rolled towards Auschwitz, alarm bells should have rung in Whitehall.
Throughout this period of intense killing at Auschwitz, the Allies were able to bomb military and industrial targets in Poland from captured airfields in southern Italy. Paving the way for the bombers were the aerial reconnaissance units. One of their missions was to photograph a new Nazi factory, the IG Farben synthetic oil and rubber plant near a town called Monowitz. From 15,000 feet, photographs were taken for several kilometers over the factory site. On return, the photographs were examined by interpreters. They studied the factory and oil installations in minute detail, recording the key areas of the plant's operation. But what the interpreters failed to identify were the rows upon rows of huts in a camp nearby. They failed to identify the gas chambers and the crematoria. No analysis or intelligence commentary was made on the photographs of the death camp.
We have to remember that for photo reconnaissance during the war, that there were thousands and thousands of images being brought in every day. And for those whose task it was to look at the IG Farben plant at Monowitz, which they wanted to bomb, that was what they focused on. They may have seen some of the surrounding camps and thought that it was simply labour camps, like thousands of labour camps over the rest of Germany and Central Europe. And so the terrible tragedy is that they had the camp, in a sense, in their sights, but they didn't realise what they were looking at.
Enhanced by modern digital technology, these aerial photographs, taken in August 1944, reveal Nazi preparations for the mass deportations from Hungary. The SS built a new railway spur which would carry the deportees directly to the crematoria. On arrival, anyone older than 40, every child under 15, anyone not fit for work, every pregnant woman. Most were led straight to crematoria 2 and 3, or were taken by truck to crematoria 4 and 5. Stripped of their clothes and belongings, men, women and children were led into the gas chambers. Kitty Hart Moxon was 15 years old when she arrived at Birkenau. She witnessed the entire process of extermination.
Mine was the very first hut overlooking the gas chamber and crematorium 4. But you could see what was going on. And that's when it was so incredible to actually watch hundreds and thousands of people coming in front of me, because separated by a electrified fence, and not being able to communicate, because it was forbidden to communicate with these people.
The arrival procedure of one transport of Hungarian deportees was photographed by an SS guard.
When we were outside, we were first separated, men and women. And this was the last time I saw my father. And then I was separated from my mother, who had to be dragged out already. She didn't know where she was. She had collapsed mentally and physically. And she was straight away taken to the chimney, which was belching out smoke, and we had this terrible stench on arrival, which we didn't know at that time, but we found out later it was burning bodies. So I thought at least she didn't have to go through the whole thing, what happened afterwards, because she couldn't have taken it. I mean, she obviously was not strong enough to take it.
Many of them were in a very, very bad state. Others were just totally bewildered, I would say. But nobody in their own imagination would have imagined they were going straight to die.
Deliberate deception and secrecy was key to the SS killing machine. The Nazis couldn't afford panic or the threat of an uprising amongst the new arrivals. So beautifully landscaped gardens were planted to reassure the prisoners as they were led from the trains to the gas chambers. The crematoria themselves were hidden from the inmates within a wall of birch trees.
Many of them were sitting in the woods. You know, there were lots of woods there. They were just sitting around waiting to go into the gas chambers because they had no idea. People didn't know. They thought they were told by loudspeakers they were going to have showers. So it lulled them into some false of security, of course. And I actually saw them being led into the gas chamber, groups of people. You actually saw the men pouring the gas in. There was a skylight at the top of the gas chamber, and there was always a man, sometimes in green uniform, sometimes there were kind of white things over, to put sort of disinfecting gear, and he'd walk up the ladder and empty a tin of these gas crystals into the skylight. And a few minutes after that, you could hear people actually dying, you know, screaming, because the sounds were muffled. And that would last anything up to 20 minutes. And then the next thing you'd see was fire and smoke come out of the chimney. And then you saw the men who worked inside the crematoria taking out the ash and dumping it at the back of the crematoria. Now that I saw day in, day out for 8 months.
The increase in arrivals demanded the extension of a special section known as Canada. It was a clearing camp for the belongings of the deportees, positioned directly between the 4 crematoria. After selection on the ramp, all the luggage, clothes and other possessions were collected by prisoners and brought to Canada for sorting.
There were 30 wooden sheds. In those sheds were most of the belongings of the people, all jumbled up, food, prams, toys, everything. You see, I was sorting men's jackets for 8 months. Nothing but men's jackets I had to sort. You had to do a certain quota, and if you didn't, because you got punished. There's one hut that has shoes piled up to the roof of the hut, just shoes jumbled up. People were actually told, when they were taken to the gas chamber, to tie their shoes together so that they can find them again. But of course that wasn't true. That was so that they could be found and shipped to Germany, because all the stuff was eventually shipped to Germany.
The summer of 1944 was a vital period in the Allied war effort. The Normandy invasion and the battle for France. The V-bomb attacks on Britain. And the Americans' intense fighting against the Japanese in the Pacific. All competed for Allied resources and priority. In the midst of this turmoil, both the British and American governments received formal diplomatic requests to act against the killing at Auschwitz. On the 6th of July, Churchill was notified of a petition by the Jewish Agency. It had received reports that 400,000 Hungarian Jews had already been deported to Auschwitz. Now it was appealing to Churchill's government in London and to the US War Department in Washington to do something to stop the killing. It requested that the Allies bomb the death camp and the railway lines leading to it. Having gathered enough information on the operation of Auschwitz to classify it as an extermination camp, would the Allies now consider it possible to mount a bombing raid to destroy it? By July 1944, the Allies had more detailed information than ever before about the atrocities at Auschwitz death camp. The detailed accounts by escapees of the extermination process and intelligence on the ongoing deportations prompted calls for action from several Jewish organizations. Finally, in London and Washington, the debate over Auschwitz began. At the same time, aerial reconnaissance interpreters were learning more and more about the IG Farben factory at Monowitz. Still under construction, it was one of Germany's largest synthetic oil refineries. On the 18th of July, the plant was officially designated a target for Allied bombing. But again, The interpreters failed to realize that Monowitz was part of the Auschwitz slave labor system. Just 7 kilometers from the main extermination center of Birkenau. Tens of thousands of prisoners sent here to build the vast IG Farben plant at Monowitz were literally worked to death.
But the work was carrying cement bags from a train to a building where they were building more buildings, their factories. But we were not allowed to walk with this bag. We had to run day in, day out, 25 kilos, which is tremendously heavy.
The work was supervised by capos, prisoners put in charge of other prisoners.
Capos were watching you, and the capos are ex-criminals, rapists, murderers, men with bad tempers, who taken out of the prisons by the Nazis, taken to the camps to do the dirty work for the Nazis. So you can expect anything of those men.
They were murderers, they were really heavy criminals, and they had the power of life or death over us. They walked around with this stick, and when we didn't run fast enough with our cement bag on the back, we got hit by capos.
It was a bad life, a frightened bad life. And that's why a lot of them didn't want, they couldn't no more, they didn't want to, they gave up. They didn't see nothing nice, what is still in store. I did, my wife and child, and I wanted to be back. But a lot of them didn't, and they died because they were weak. We became weak. And I remember the day, the selection, a big barrack full of men, undressed. There's 2 tables in the front, on each table an SS, and we got to move up towards the 2 tables. Behind me is Eddie Hamel, a man, a professional footballer from Ajax, Amsterdam. He is behind me and he says, I got an abscess in my mouth and I don't know what's going to happen.
We had to line up completely naked and we had to walk in front of them, and we all had the drive to be straight, chest out, and show them how wonderful you can walk in front of them and smile at them to show I'm all right, you know, don't select me, because we knew when you're getting selected, you will go, you don't live anymore.
The queue moves up. I'm near the 2 tables. I walk between the 2 tables, and the SS directs me to the right. And as I walk away, I look behind me, thinking Eddie Hamel will come behind me. He's directed to the left, and I never saw Eddie Hamel again. He was a guest because he had an abscess in his mouth.
So many were selected and never seen again. Even if one of the girls had a full bust, they were suspecting that she's pregnant or something, and never seen again.
The killings in the summer of 1944 were on such a scale that the crematoria could not cope. This aerial reconnaissance photograph, taken on the 25th of August, shows a large plume of smoke in the area behind Crematorium 5. To increase the extermination potential of Birkenau, some of the bodies from the gas chambers were burnt in open pits.
Corpses were stacked up at the back of the crematoria. We saw people lined up being actually shot and heard the shots, and saw people being thrown into the pits and burnt alive, some people.
Winston Churchill was appalled by reports of the killings at Auschwitz. He called it Probably the greatest and most horrible crime ever committed in the whole history of the world. He was immediately in favor of the proposal by the Jewish agency to bomb the camp. "Get anything you can out of the Air Force," he wrote. "Invoke me if necessary." The Air Ministry gathered to discuss the feasibility of the bombing. The debate centered on whether the Allies could carry out raids with the precision to destroy the gas chambers and crematoria without killing thousands of inmates. The first option was a precision raid by low-flying Mosquito bombers, requiring a 1,200-mile flight to Poland.
To mount a precision bombing attack on Auschwitz, it was a very difficult operation to mount, very long distances from bases either in the Mediterranean or in England, and I think that to actually bomb precisely at that range would have been extremely difficult with the aircraft that were capable of doing it.
Many of the requests to bomb focused on the railway lines leading to the death camp.
The railways could certainly have been bombed in 1944. They were bombing railways all over Europe, of course, when they chose to. The problem here, of course, is, first of all, that it's a very difficult target to hit. Secondly, you can interrupt a railway, and you can be up and operating again within a matter of hours, at the very latest in a matter of days. Germans were mending railways all over Europe, often using slave labor. So I think the problem there is that attacking the railways would mean attacking the railways over and over again, and that would mean the diversion of very much more substantial resources.
They didn't think they ought to try to divert resources. They had 1,000 things to worry about. There's chaos on all fronts. The Allies were fighting two wars, one in Europe and one in the Pacific against Japan. And winning the war became the main object of all endeavors.
The next option considered to destroy the mechanism of extermination was a raid by heavy bombers. This could stop the killing in the gas chambers, but would also endanger the lives of the prisoners still incarcerated in the camp.
We were waiting, we were hoping for bombs. Even though it could have hit us, but we were hoping that they are bombing. I didn't mind dying by the bombs. For me it was more important that that something happened from outside, that somebody was doing something.
Since the request to bomb Auschwitz in July 1944, the Allies had considered its feasibility. Increasing information about the extermination camp continued to fuel the debate. Could a heavy bombing mission be planned in time to halt the killing?
By 1944, the Allies were capable of planning and mounting a bombing operation in a very short space of time. I mean, this was a sophisticated organization now. So I think we should be in no doubt that it was operationally possible for British and American bombers to reach Auschwitz in 1944.
But questions remained about the effectiveness of a heavy bomber raid on Auschwitz.
Bombing an extermination camp is quite different from bombing a military-industrial target. A bombing raid of a military-industrial target consists of flying over at about 30,000 feet or 25,000 feet and simply dropping bombs on them. There was no way to be more precise about this. In fact, more than half of the Allied bombs dropped during the war did not fall within 1,000 feet of their target. However, destroying Auschwitz in an extermination camp is absolutely different from this. You're not trying to blast the place down into smithereens. You're trying to stop the killing process without killing the inmates. And that's vastly harder. Now, the gas chambers at Auschwitz are about the size of two tennis courts, and they were partially underground. Now, planes flying over 30,000 feet with the technology that existed in 1944, which consists of simply pushing a button and dropping the bomb when you think you're over the target, plainly will not have the precision necessary to do this, plainly and obviously.
After 3 months of debate, both the British government and the US War Department rejected all requests to bomb the death camp and the railway lines leading to it.
The final refusal to bomb Auschwitz in 1944 has, I think, many causes. First of all, they wanted to focus on the military issues, and they thought they would defeat Germany quite quickly and liberate people anyway. Secondly, the operation was a difficult operation over a long distance, where there could be no real certainty that you would actually find the target and destroy it with any kind of accuracy. And I think the combination of these different considerations in the end persuaded the Allies that bombing Auschwitz was not worth it.
It remains one of the most controversial decisions of the war.
The RAF flew missions to Warsaw to drop aid to the Home Army during the Warsaw Uprising in August 1944. If that was possible, why wasn't it possible to bomb the Auschwitz camp? Even if it had caused collateral damage or been ineffective, it would have sent a very powerful message to the Nazis. It might have scared them into shutting down the gas chambers. It would have showed that the Allies were not prepared to see millions of innocent people being slaughtered just because they were Jewish. And the failure to make that gesture, that moral gesture, will forever be a stain on the Allies' war record.
If it was tried, it might have worked. On the other hand, what you might well have had been a complete fiasco. You might have actually killed the Jews while leaving the gas chambers and crematoria intact, in which case there would have unquestionably have been denunciations of this foolhardy mission then and now.
The Allies' priority remained the intense offensive against Germany's military and industrial targets. As part of that campaign, US bombers attacked the IG Farben synthetic oil plant at Monowitz. By a supreme irony, some of the bombs meant for the factory actually hit the death camp at Auschwitz-Birkenau. These are authentic aerial photographs from the actual raid on the 13th of September. Bombs fell on the Birkenau railway sidings leading to the crematoria and on the barracks of Auschwitz I, killing 40 prisoners and 15 SS guards.
We heard the bombing. It was a joy. How joyful it was when we shouted, "Hooray, hooray! Drop the bombs everywhere, come on." We were not worried whether we are going to get killed, but that's the first contact we had with the Allied forces. The first contact which we had with the people who we hoped are going to liberate us.
I'd rather die by a bomb, an English or whatever, than go on living like that.
This extraordinary photograph shows bombs destined for the IG Farben factory poised directly over crematoria 2 and 3. The accidental bombing had no effect on the operation of the death camp. The killing at Auschwitz continued, until finally the SS themselves dismantled the gas chambers and crematoria, destroying the evidence of extermination from the advancing Soviet army. In total, almost 1.5 million people, political prisoners, Soviet POWs, homosexuals, gypsies, Jews, had been murdered at Auschwitz. On the 27th of January 1945, Soviet soldiers liberated the camp. The SS had left the weakest prisoners behind to die. Thousands of others had already been transported to labor camps and factories in Germany. Hundreds of thousands perished on forced death marches. Between the first request to bomb Auschwitz in July 1944 and the destruction of the crematoria by the SS, more than 150,000 people had been murdered in the gas chambers.
I think there's no question that the Allies should have done more, not just in the case of Auschwitz, but in the case of the mounting evidence of German genocide and barbarism. And I think that was a moral lapse on the part of the Allies.
The Jews were being killed by the Nazis, and it was, to stop this, you had to stop Nazi Germany by destroying it. It's as simple as that. And that was what the Allies were trying to do and did very successfully.
On the 6th of October, my name came up for deportation to the east. We didn't know where. We were told, you're going to be transported to the east where you're going to work for the German Reich. Probably in a factory, or we didn't know where, what. They didn't tell you you're going into a concentration camp.
We became so automatic. Whatever we were told, we had to do. There was no question of saying, no, I will not go. It was the hottest day I've ever remembered in my life. We were all packed in like sardines. If we touched each other, the bodies were burning.
I remember
Allied war effort. Information on Nazi atrocities in occupied Europe increased throughout the early years of the war. Reports from Jewish organizations and the Polish underground told of brutal anti-Semitic measures and the segregation of Jews into ghettos. In July 1941, intercepted and decrypted German Enigma codes revealed that Nazi terror had turned into mass murder in the Soviet Union. SS execution squads, known as Einsatzgruppen, were rounding up and shooting Jews and communists. From May 1940, ways leading to the death camp. What did the Allies know about Auschwitz? Why didn't they do something to stop the killing?
By the summer of 1944, the British government knew that Auschwitz was a place of mass murder. Why, given this information, didn't the Allies act sooner? And why, specifically, didn't they bomb Auschwitz?
It's heartbreaking that they didn't. They knew there were gas chambers there. Why didn't they do it?
Gathering intelligence about the Nazi state was a crucial part of our systematic policy of extermination. What the Nazis called the final solution.
By the time the Reich report reaches London, the British government knows that Jews are being slaughtered in vast numbers in Russia by SS units. But they simply could not believe that Jews were being deported from all over Europe to places in the East simply in order to be murdered. This was something that beggared the imagination. You had to stop being human to believe that such a thing was possible. If you thought the Germans were halfway rational, it seemed to be a bizarre use of rare resources, locomotives, rolling stock, in the middle of a war that had reached a critical stage, shipping Jews all the way to Poland just to kill them. This seemed unbelievable.
Decryptions of German police codes and transport directives revealed that Jews were being rounded up all over occupied Europe and deported to unknown destinations in the East.
Thousands are being packed into open lorries. About 1.5 million Jews have simply disappeared altogether. No one knows how or where.
Then, on the 10th of August, 1942, the Foreign Office received a telegram from Gerhard Riegner of the World Jewish Congress. Based on a report smuggled out of Germany, it revealed Nazi plans for the total annihilation of the Jewish people. Extermination at one blow. It was the first report to reach the West of